Evening, everybody. We'll just wait for people to jump on in and get themselves set up, if that's all right. Got a few people just joining. If you are able to pop your screens on, if you've got that capability, that would be superb. And we'll just give a few more people a chance to come on in. Okay, cool. Well, we'll look to start on time and try and get everybody away at a reasonable hour as well. We're just saying to some of our hosting team, we may not be an hour, but we'll certainly allocate an hour and see how long that takes us. But thanks to everyone for tuning in, giving up your time tonight. So just as a couple of kind of introductions and kind of set the scene for tonight, really. You've got myself, Matt Dando Thompson, who head of the talent pathway I am for Cricket Wales. You've got Ian Williams, who hopefully is in the top left of your screen. Ian might want to give you a wave. Ian is the boys regional lead for Cricket Wales East in the pathway. We're lucky enough to have Amy Rees with us tonight, who's the head of women and girls cricket across all of Welsh cricket for her sins. And you've also got some of the workforce and coach education team in Ian Martin and Mark Dixon, who have got a vast amount of experience around some of the topics we're going to chat through tonight as well. So hopefully, none of us are the gospels of all cricket knowledge, but I'm hopefully if people have got questions or bits you want to kind of get out of tonight, I'm reasonably confident the five of us might be able to share a little bit of wisdom and advice for you, hopefully. So, look, the point of tonight really, I think, is just for. I'm hoping we've got a lot of people on here that are involved in kind of softball cricket or involved in their junior club programs and involved in that kind of hardball junior space. And really, how this came about tonight was just a bit of feedback, in the network really, where there's maybe a little bit of a gap around just trying to help you guys build up a little bit of confidence around what you might do with your players in your clubs or in other spaces around transitioning players from predominantly softball environment into getting a cricket ball in their hand, really. So hopefully that kind of sets the scene. But tonight we've got literally 4 very, very brief slides which we'll kind of run through. But I really hope it's not a death by PowerPoint type evening. That's not the intention. I think all of us on this call would love to hear from your experiences and a chance for everyone and anyone to kind of come off mute, be a bit interactive and share with us some of your problems or conundrums or kind of scenarios and contexts that you live and breathe kind of in your own cricket club. So I hope that makes sense, but keep yourselves on mute for now. As I say, there'll be a chance to come off mute, and as I say, if you are able to stick your camera on so we can see who we're talking to, that's always helpful. And the chat box, I believe, is live and active. So if you get a question or something doesn't make sense halfway through anything I'm saying or anybody else, which is very likely to happen probably, just pop something in the chat box and we'll make sure we get around to that if that's okay. So without any further ado, I will just share my screen if that's okay, and I'd appreciate just a thumbs up from somebody on my screen to show me that they can see that, which is great. I can see that. Fantastic. So wonderful. So yeah, look, key take homes from tonight, as I say, it's just trying to provide a couple of real small, hopefully reasonably basic pointers. I don't think anything we'll cover tonight is especially rocket science. Maybe it is, I'm not sure. But ultimately, when we're talking transitioning boys and girls from softball into hardball cricket, look, ultimately, whatever we chat through, it needs to be fun. It needs to be a little bit progressive, and hopefully engaging. Safety is pretty much a prerequisite when we talked about this type of stuff. So if we're hitting those 4 things pretty much in what we do, then you're probably doing a much better job, and hopefully you'll realize that you probably do a lot of these things that we might touch on tonight already. So hopefully a little confidence booster for you there. But look, we'll just run through each discipline, I think, very, very quickly. So we thought we'd start with batting, and look, some of the content from tonight is, we've just kind of garnered the views of a lot of the coaches, certainly within the Cricket Wales team, that are involved in this type of stuff day to day, as well as us in the pathway. So look, if you've got a batter, some of our kind of key messages that popped up, look, if you've got a batter that's never put on batting equipment before, that can be quite a big deal. Often it's the unknown and the unfamiliar um, that can cause a little bit of trepidation and a little bit of nervousness. Some kids are much better at diving out of their comfort zone than others. So the more we can do just to kind of make them familiar with things, certainly where cricket kit is involved, the better. So it might sound really, really stupid, but actually getting children to get used to padding up, forget going into the nets, for a start, just get them used to padding up and getting familiar with the equipment, what goes where. And there's all sorts of little fun and games you can do with that. And, timed competitions, we all know timed out, you've got 2 minutes to get to the crease. Little things like just getting people familiar with getting the kit on, taking it off, and getting really, really comfortable with that. And the same goes for running between the wickets. It can be really weird, and I'm sure we've all seen youngsters who have been waddling back and forth, and there's that can be a pretty unfamiliar sensation as well as a youngster when you're trying to get used to what that feels like, as well as trying to hit a ball and score some runs and that type of thing. So all sorts of things you can do with running between the wickets, getting the kit on to start with, and just that could be a whole session in itself potentially. Um, and then other little things, we probably skim over them as coaches, and we sometimes make the mistake of assuming that kids know all this stuff when sometimes maybe nobody's ever actually sat them down and talked through them some of these things. So the basics of taking guard, what is a taking guard, getting them familiar with where to stand at the crease and middle stump, leg stump, off stump, and trying to work out some of that. um little things like assessing the pitch. Kids will see it on TV, they'll see batters going down the wicket, and things are referred to as gardening, or batters are scraping things away in the middle of the wicket. We all might see it on a Saturday or a Sunday, but actually what are they doing? Are they how is that helping their game? So it's just trying to talk them through the real basics of the nuances of what being out in the middle as a batter means. If we want to get a bit more technical, then obviously we can do around grip and that type of stuff. Often you'll see in hardball environments. I can't speak for anybody else on this call. I don't see probably too many technically correct grips in softball cricket. It's all whack and wallop and hit it to all parts of whatever space that you're using. And probably as you start to develop your experience in hardball, you do then need to maybe look at how would you grip a bat in something close to the most technical proficient way as you can. So those are probably just four little points. Hopefully, as I say, none of that hopefully is brand new information. General safety, you'll see that bullet point probably across all of the slides in a minute. As soon as you go into a net environment, for example, and you'll do that in hardball cricket. Again, if a youngster's not kind of got themselves up to speed with bit of basic net safety, you can get yourself in trouble pretty quickly. So an example, typically don't stick your head, even if you've got a helmet on, don't stick your head down to pick the ball up in the nets. If you're in a net next door to somebody, you can easily have a ball crashing into you. And that's the very last thing you want if you're developing confidence and that type of thing in a youngster, is to have a ball flying into your shoulder from the net next door. So little things like sticking your bat out into the net and fishing the ball out with your foot are really good kind of basic net safety guidelines that you look to use from that angle. There we are, and my animation's working. So yeah, look, once that kit is on, I think the key thing for us is just to be progressive. Going back to the first slide, I wouldn't probably, I don't think any of us would advocate that you jump from a softball straight into hard cricket ball stuff. I think once they have that kit on and they're starting to get familiar with it, it's still probably advisable to go down the plastic ball route and the Incredible route, and just gradually develop that confidence in still being able to have some success and get used to that kit being on without the fear necessarily of being hit and the consequences that come with that. So that's probably maybe a step two. And look, the obvious thing to say is that you'll have players that jump straight through this, want to get stuck in, and you'll have others that maybe flip back and forth, and you might need to fluctuate between the various stages to build that confidence up. So I'm going to pause there for just 2 secs. Appreciate I've just rattled on for 2 or 3 minutes without really taking breath. So if anybody wants to come off mute on a batting perspective, there will be chance to at the end, but and I'll open that back up to any of our hosts as well if you want to take the floor on anything on batting. I can't see the chat box at the moment, so Ian, you might have to one of the Ians might have to just show me if there's anything showing on chat.
Nothing on chat so far. I don't think Matt.
Nothing on chat. That means I've made no sense or lots of sense. So as I say, leave that open. Jonathan, I can see you. Was that you coming off mute or not? No, all good. Okay, cool. Wonderful. Well, we'll skip to bowling. If you, as I say, if you get anything that pops to mind, any of you, just please pop it in the chat or hold on to it for 2 secs at the end. Yeah, look, bowling. You come back off that bit. Probably the obvious difference with bowling is you haven't got the protective equipment as a batting and the fear of being hit, which is your typical kind of worry as a youngster or even as a coach. Bowling's a little bit different, isn't it? You don't have the protective equipment. You don't necessarily have the ball coming down at you at whatever pace or height. So you will typically, not always, but you will typically find that bowling is a bit easier to incorporate that transition from softball to hardball. You may find players love the ball coming down at them as a batter. You might find that a lot more quite happily send the ball back down to somebody else. So bowling, you've got probably a little bit more flexibility. Look, the net safety point remains the same, probably more so for the bowlers because you won't have any protective equipment on as you retrieve the ball. So that's the obvious point to make there in relation to the nets. But the same types of things as we were talking about taking guard and assessing the pitch and that type of thing. The minute you get a hard ball in your hand as a youngster, it's a pretty cool feeling. But suddenly you've got a seam, suddenly you've got a ball that could be in a condition that I'd probably give to my dog, or you might have one that looks in amazing condition as well that you really want to look after. So you've got a whole spectrum of things to talk through with youngsters around, look, how would you hold the ball as a seam bowler? How would you hold the ball as a spinner? So some real basic technical points there, but on a real top line general level, why would you shine the ball? You see players do it on TV all the time. How would you shine the ball? What are they trying to shine the ball for? What advantage are they trying to gain? So there's all sorts of questions and conversations that you can have with that, and players, it's a really good chance for them to experiment with that. And actually what they might find is some of the plastic balls they've been using would swing a lot more, and they'll find that obviously playing around with a cricket ball has got its own nuances as well. So starting to understand the difference between the various type of balls that they use is really important. And that's not to say that catching and reactions off their own bowling isn't going to happen. And that's sometimes a really nice way to incorporate some hardball stuff into your bowling. We all might see it on the telly or in whatever cricket space we're at. Players are hitting the ball back at bowlers harder than probably what they ever have done before, even at junior level. So getting youngsters familiar with bowling the ball with a hard ball might be one thing, but actually we'll come on to fielding shortly. That you might find that there's some fairly creative ways of incorporating a hard ball with the ball coming back to them having just bowled as well. Right size ball is really important, and this one probably gets overlooked a little bit as well. So you may or may not be familiar with the ECB ball size recommendations, and that's reasonably common knowledge, certainly at club cricket level, and your junior club coordinators will have knowledge of that. We might be able to share that in the chat box actually if I get time later on this call. But there's a link there which will show you the kind of ideal ball sizes for various age groups. So typically you'll have a slightly smaller ball at kind of under 10 to under 12 level, and as players develop and physically get bigger, the ball size matches that. So again, you might find an under 10 having a real big adult size cricket ball in their hand is not a particularly natural feeling. And as I say, if we're trying to develop some confidence and build up that experience, it's probably best to do that with the most appropriate ball size for their age group. I appreciate that may or may not be in your control. As coaches, you sometimes just coach with the balls that you're given. So just one to consider. And as I say, it's slightly easier potentially to incorporate that, but still the progressive part of that is reasonably important to note. Fab, I'm going to rattle on. If someone would like to interrupt me, that's absolutely fine. More than welcome. I'm just going to whistle on to my last one of fielding. And look, fielding's probably the one which is most common. Doesn't matter whether you're a bowler or a batter, you're going to be fielding if you're playing hardball cricket, sooner rather than later, and probably for the majority of the game. So look, fielding's the obvious one and poses us lots of opportunities, but also a few considerations. So very much like the batting, in the sense of maybe building up your what's the word, kind of tolerance and volume, I would suggest, of different types of balls. So I probably wouldn't jump straight to a cricket ball. You can play around with tennis balls, you can play around with the plastic balls, various types of tennis ball as well, actually. So you can have the very decompressed ones, the ones that are really, really soft. And if it was to hit you in the forehead, you wouldn't feel a thing, compared to a normal tennis ball, which could still actually, you'd feel that and maybe not be particularly comfortable with it. So um, ultimately, there's no substitute for volume though. In terms of catching and fielding, players generally will develop more confidence the more they do something and the more success they have in doing something. So I would just be wary of that one. I think the more they do it, the more you can create some drills and some games where they're able to have some success is going to be beneficial towards developing that confidence. So, as I say, just different types of ball, but be wary of the challenges that each ball presents is probably what I would say. So, again, not a rocket science comment to make, but if you know what I'm talking about on a decompressed tennis ball, the ones that are really, really soft, they are very, very difficult to catch. They want to jump out your hand even more so than a normal tennis ball. So actually weighing up that, how much do we want players to have success versus incorporating a hard ball, sometimes you might find that a hard ball is actually easier to catch. So a plastic Incredible doesn't want to jump out your hands as much as the tennis ball does. So there's a couple of technical things that you might want to watch out for in terms of giving with the body with a harder ball versus, as I say, a soft tennis ball that wants to jump out your hand. So it's just being wary of the different types of ball and the reactions that you'll get when trying to catch those. All of that is kind of geared around just trying to work out how much success and challenge we can give to players. But generally, throwing, really easy to incorporate a hard ball straight away into throwing. Obviously, there's not the impact of the ball coming at the player there. So in a similar way to bowling, get them throwing with a hard ball, I would suggest, and I don't really foresee any issue with that. Obviously, if you've got large groups of numbers in your sessions, there's probably, again, a small safety bit to consider if balls are flying everywhere with hard balls in play. But if your session's set up, relatively appropriately, then there's tons of things you can do with throwing that can incorporate a hard ball, and you can get players fairly accustomed to that reasonably quickly. And probably a really important one, I think this is probably the most undervalued comment, probably in coaching, let alone in softball to hardball. It's the language we as coaches use, I think, around a lot of this. So same could go for batting, bowling, but I've probably used a fielding example in this sense. I think the language you use to your players is really important when you're trying to develop confidence in them. So for me, there's a reasonably subtle difference in, if you were to set up two cones and you've got you've got a goal effectively, and you're trying to score past your player, or you're trying to get them to get accustomed to catching a harder ball. Catch as many as you can when they're coming at you. Whilst that's a pretty clear instruction, that doesn't encourage them necessarily. They're going to try and catch it, obviously. But actually, if you were to kind of say, "Oh, look, I'd like you to protect your goal," and you incentivize them for trying to catch it or to stop it, what you might find is that players may not catch it, but they're diving to stop the ball going in the goal, and inadvertently they are wanting for the ball to come to them, and they're wanting to stop that goal being scored, if that makes sense, rather than just saying catch the ball. It's trying to find ways in the way that you instruct them to almost get them to do what you want without directly telling them. Does that make sense? So I'd just really encourage you to be wary of your language, and if there's a way in which you can direct and encourage players to to dive around, to get stuck in, to want the ball to come to them. That is ultimately what fielding tends to be. It's a mindset and an attitude a lot of the time. Players will always drop catches and players will take fantastic catches, but what we want is players to want the ball to come to them and want to be impacted by the game. We don't want players, feeling nervous and scared about the ball coming to them or whatever happens after that. So, yeah, that's kind of I've tried to whistle through that as quickly as I can. I think, but I think the biggest question, as I say, we wanted to get out of tonight. I wouldn't have covered everything there by any means, but what's your context really? I think is the big question, and that's probably where I'm gonna throw it back out to everybody on this call, and do chuck something in the chat box or come off mute if you want to kind of ask or share your experiences or challenges that you've had, whether it's a particular player or a particular group, or you're just not sure on something. I'll well, hopefully we've got a few people on this call who can lend a hand. There's bound to be somebody. Gareth's come off mute. I can see straight away. Well done, Gareth.
Oh, I am Matt. I think I've dialed in a little bit late, so it's the classic question of will the slides be shared? Because I think I've only just caught the fielding part.
Yes, of course they will. Yeah, no problem. I can
Brilliant.
send that afterwards.
Thank you.
All good. Somebody must.
Hi, Matt. It's Paul Richards here. With Crossy Kylie Club. I think you touch. I'm going back to the batting. Well, and just the general transition overall. I think what I've found over the last couple of years with the under 11s is, as well as obviously the technical stuff, it's, you mentioned in the field, I think it's mindset, and it's the environment of stepping from what predominantly is the fun environment to actually being in the middle of the wicket in a game situation type thing, and I think that's I feel is a big part of the transition, is trying to kind of quell that fear of the mindset and the big kind of jump from, actually I've got pads on, I'm in the middle of a game situation here type thing, so obviously we can do the technical stuff, and it's encouragement and stuff like that, but is there anything you guys would suggest for that kind of part of it, the mindset, and just the whole kind of jump from softball fun to, okay, it's still fun, we obviously want to make it fun, but I think what I've picked up on the last couple of years is it is that whole kind of environment that is a big part of the transition as well. Yeah,
sure. It's a really good point, and it's a really good question. At the risk of hospital passing this to any of our hosts, I'm gonna I don't know, Ames, do you want to kind of pick up on any, and it doesn't have to be from a girls context, it might be, is there anything that kind of stands out to you on that one from your experience?
Yeah, look, if you do have the opportunity to have bits of practice in the middle of, in the middle, rather than just nets all the time, so you can actually play like practice games. But I think that environment of, look, you're not going to succeed all the time. It is a really tough game and sometimes you will get out, but that environment is safe enough for them to understand that, and they don't feel they're going to be shouted at, or like obviously people aren't going to shout at them, but they don't feel like that's going to happen to them. I think that's one of the biggest things for us. Like, when we tell girls that are 18, like, we expect more failure than success, really, especially when you're learning to play the game. But it's that environment of trying to encourage them, but also, that it will go wrong sometimes. But I think you're right, playing out in the middle, like if you've got an AstroTurf at your club, or you can get on the edge of the square and just play there, that does help maybe.
Yeah, can I just jump in as well then? Paul, how are you doing? Long time.
All right.
We do exactly the same our age groups rotate on the square on the training night. Obviously, it needs to be safe, but just playing games and just changing the rules just to make it entertaining, just like a softball game. But they get used to wearing the equipment, get used to the fielding positions and the ball coming to them, and nothing substitutes, as Matt said, volume. So if you can get plenty of practice, that eases it, because if you're just training in the nets and then you go to the outside and straight into a game, that's too big a jump. So have a quiet word with your groundsman and see if you can get onto the square as often as possible.
Yeah. Okay.
One
Thank you.
field we used to run, Paul, is exactly as Ames and Dixie described. So it doesn't even have to involve, necessarily batters and equipment. The whole, if you're fielding, getting to know fielding positions for a start is a massive deal for youngsters. Well, they might be, but if any youngster was like me, which I'm hoping they're not now, you'd have learned every fielding position by the age of 9. We don't tend to have many kids that know that type of stuff these days. So going through an exercise out in the middle of starting to learn some of the basic fielding positions and knowing where the ball's likely to go to those positions, you can have all sorts of kind of fun anticipation games of that's how you incorporate your throw in. That's how you get used to being out in the middle, as Dixie mentioned. So, yeah, hopefully that touches on a bit of what you've mentioned.
Paul, I think I just repeat what Matt said then. You can have control games in the middle, and particularly if you've got an AstroTurf wicket, that's always quite useful, I think, in that you can just have the younger boys bowling to the younger boys when they're first coming into it. Even if they're all under 11, you might have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old who's born in September and essentially is almost 3 years older than some of them. But those control games on practice nights will get them used then to what I presume in Gwent, in the same as Cardiff and Vale, would be pairs cricket. So they haven't got a fear being out because they're going to stay in for 4 overs anyway. So that you can take away that fear of failure because they're still going to be there, even if they get out first ball. So, and it's just that encouragement, and they all get used to it. We've all done it, haven't we? We've all been out first ball, but it's part of cricket, I'm afraid.
Paul,
Yeah,
thanks for
okay.
kicking us off. That's a really
Thanks, guys.
lovely start into your context. So thanks for that. Has anybody else got anything they want to kind of along a similar line or something a little bit different? Yeah, Paul Rowe, hand up.
Yeah. So
Hello.
basically, we just acquired 3 new kits for our juniors, to obviously allow kids to participate in the hardball for the under 11s. We're currently only indoor at the moment, so obviously it's only going to be nets, really. Obviously practicing hardball outfield for the under 11s. But what we've kind of said last session is we practiced them kitting up, and that was all we did so far. But we also made it a game. Obviously, the first one got a little prize, and so on. So we are enticing more and more to get involved. But the one thing we're obviously health and safety wise is we've also said the rules is everyone's got to be aware. If you're down bowling, you've got to be watching that ball at all times. If you don't watch that ball, then you will not be able to participate in the actual activity because obviously they're not being left themselves. So that's where we're at the moment, and obviously we have got about, I think, 3 players already play North Wales, so they're obviously used to the hardball aspect as well. So hopefully more and more will learn off them.
Yeah, look, Niall, it sounds like you've got. Sorry, your line's a little bit crackly, so I think I got all of that. It sounds like you're doing a lot of really good stuff already. So it depends on everybody's space and context is different indoors, isn't it? And we're all kind of governed by whatever facility and space that you're using. Look, indoor cricket can be, when used properly, can be a really good introduction into some of this stuff that is obviously it's not outside, but you can start to do the types of the fielding positions and some of the anticipation, the running between the wickets. You can start to do all of that type of stuff. I suppose. Well, we'd only say this in the pathway. It's not a pathway specific session tonight, but yeah, you just got to weigh up that kind of opportunity in a session because an indoor game can obviously mean a lot of standing around at times. But if your numbers are low and you've got an opportunity to do a pairs cricket equivalent indoors, that can be a great way of trying to do some of the stuff you've talked about and some of the stuff that we've mentioned in a similar setting. Paul, sorry, Paul. I think Niall and Paul put their hands
No,
up at the
cheers.
same time. So, Paul, did you have one to chuck in the mix?
Yeah, it was just about, I suppose, with a built hat on, but also from a coaching perspective as well. It's the issue I've often found is I think that from a skill perspective, the batting, throwing, catching, bowling is similar, whatever ball you use. But the difference comes when you've got pads, bats, etc. to put on. So from if you're a person with the ability to go out and buy equipment that's specific to your child, because one 8-year-old, one 11-year-old, they can be the same size, it can be very different sizes. So from a club perspective, how much do you get? Where do you get it from? Do you get different sizes? Do you ask the parents to go and buy equipment, or how do you make sure you've got the right size? Because I've seen so many players who 11-year-olds potentially have got pads on, they're up to their waist. But so what's the best way of going about it from a club perspective in buying the right equipment so you're actually getting the benefit of it?
Yeah, great question.
I'm not quite sure how to frame the question, but that seems to be the issue.
I have a view on that, but I'm probably not the best one to. So I'm going to probably hospital pass that one to one of our club. So Ian, have you got any kind of, from a club development kind of officer piece? Have you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Joe, I've been making a few notes as we go. I've got 3 or 4 things wrote down. One of them is the fact that you see a lot of players who don't wear they've got protective equipment on, but how many thigh pads do you see that protecting the midriff rather than the thigh, for instance? So it is an important. It's a good question. There are, on most websites, when you're buying equipment, Paul, there's size guides, so parents could measure, and I think they do even like knee roll to the bottom of the pad in the pad terms. Bats wise, there is sizing charts as well, isn't there? I think roughly if your player's 5 foot tall, a size 4/5 bat is appropriate. But you're right, those glove sizes. I had the similar thing. My 11-year-old son, I bought him some pads and gloves for Christmas. Well, Father Christmas bought him for Christmas. And trying to get those right online took a bit of jigging around rather than going to the local shop and trying them on. But yeah, there are size guides would be generally the feedback I give you there, Paul.
Yeah, I've looked at that. I think the issue in a way is if the club is buying it, because we're not expecting or wanting parents to spend a lot of money on kit. It's just that how much, and I think I'm throwing it out there because I know I've had the same conversation with other clubs and they're not quite sure what to get. What's the best way to do it?
I know Ram Cricket are really good with packages. You could get like a good £200. You could buy a lot of pad sets and bats and equipment that way. I'd say that's the way to go down as a club. The club that I'm involved with, we haven't bought a team bag for a long time now. The players tend to have their own, but yeah, those new ones, we've always got a surplus lying around in different bags.
I think it comes down to return on investment for the club. I think, Paul, if you're looking to get stuff, look, it's just my view, but helmets and bats tend to be the expensive bits. Not that pads and gloves aren't, but typically, look, a couple of helmets can go quite a long way, in various sizes, and you can obviously swap them and what have you, and that saves a cost for a parent. So look, even a couple of helmets in various sizes can go significantly long way in your junior section, and I would suggest the same could go for cricket bats. If there's 2 or 3 at a certain weight, or as Ian said, kind of a certain size, and if as a club you've got the capability to do that, then suddenly 1 bat or 2 bats at a certain weight can go, that can service 6 to 7 players potentially, depending on if they're struggling. So heavier bats than what a player is capable of using, typically at an early age, is going to not be conducive towards any kind of technical development. And I think probably all of the hosts on this would probably agree with that.
Yeah, we see that a lot of that, don't we? See a lot of the players who've got the bats are too heavy for them.
So yeah, getting the bat right, look, not that if you've got a pair of gloves too big or pads too big, isn't it? It's not helpful. You want players to feel as comfortable as they possibly can. I'd probably say if it was an order of priority, I'd probably say helmet and bats would be my top two to get as close to right as you could. But yeah, good question.
Can I come in there, Matt?
Of course you can, mate. Yeah.
We bought a couple of junior kit bags, so they had all of the, three bats, 3 helmets, 3 sets of pads, wicketkeeper pads. I've just put a link into the chat. We're not sort of promoting any particular supplier, but they actually do make these bags up, and we bought 2 different sizes, one for under 10s, one for under 13s. They become the stock for the club. They do get ruined after a couple of years because they get scrumped and all sorts of things happen. But if you want to follow that link, that's quite good value. And if you're starting up a new team, there's no reason why a Sport Wales grant can't pay for one of those. And they come in around 350 quid. Sounds a lot, but you get a lot of kit with it as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dixie. And Gareth's just put there on the chat as well that they've bought some bits from a kind of a Sports Directy type place as well. So it sounds like there's some options out there. So Paul, thanks for that. I think if there's a golden bullet to that question, I think we'd all be laughing as anybody involved in junior cricket.
Sorry, Matt. I've got a couple of things wrote down. I think you covered an awful lot there. Wearing the protective equipment correctly is a big one. I think it's a bit of a common sense, and coaches making that sort of mental risk assessment in their head to matching up their players, whether that be training in a net or a training match or an actual match. And I say if batters are wearing protective equipment correctly, more often than not, the danger, and say not a phrase that a coach would use particularly, but if you're looking at it, the danger would be for the fielders and the bowler, especially if you play under 11s off 17 yards, batters a yard out from the stumps, follow through, all of a sudden they're 12 yards away and that ball coming back to them. So it's just making if you've got the Wales opening batter under 13s against a newish bowler, you'd have to be a bit, it's that common sense approach between the two coaches to say, do you know what, things could go west quite quickly here. So should we just use a little bit of common sense and maybe switch the bowling around or whatever it may be? So giving your players the technical skills to how to catch a cricket ball and building that up slowly and with lots of volume, as mentioned, that's going to be building up their confidence and hitting the right notes, I think.
Yeah, 100%. You've just reminded me of a point I probably should have made earlier. I hope this doesn't sound too daft to comment, but sometimes getting hit, if we're talking from a batter's perspective or even in the field, as a ball coming at you, sometimes it's not the worst thing. I'm not advocating we blast hard cricket balls at players who have never had a hard ball thrown at them or faced it before, but I use a hockey example. I remember my first game of hockey must have been about as a 13-year-old in goal, and I'd heard it was terrible and it hurt a lot, and the padding, and the first ball you got straight in the midriff didn't feel a thing, and the confidence that gave you, as Ian said, around what your protective equipment is able to withstand, actually it made that fear factor disappear entirely. And that's not to say you don't get balls then that hurt down the line, but almost again it's finding ways of, so it might be that you get your player padded up with a helmet on, full batting kit, and you really challenge them around getting hit by a tennis ball and getting used to the ball coming at you, and you go, oh wow, I've got hit, oh but you dealt with that great and it didn't hurt. And it's just finding that sweet spot between being progressive and keeping that safety element, but just exposing them to lots of different things in that space. So Ian, thanks for that. Thanks for reminding me of that one as well.
Can I just
anybody else? Yes,
say
I'll go for it.
something there? Obviously, well, I've only actually been a coach for less than 2 years. So I've only been a coach for less than 2 years, basically. And what I've seen is under 9s, obviously, if you're playing with the windy balls or even a tennis ball, they don't get kitted up whatsoever. Is it not worth bringing in, say, some form of rule where if they're playing a match, they should be wearing the pads to get them used to then stepping up to the under 11s, the under 13s, so that they're not scared facing that first ever ball in a brand new set of pads, not being used to wearing it against a hard ball?
It's a good point, Niall. I'm not sure, without going into specifics of rules and who's in charge of making what, which will be complicated across various leagues and whatever's going on in Wales. I think we'd probably say, we'd all agree to say, yeah, look, the earlier you can get kids familiar with putting the kit on, it doesn't have to be with that hard ball, does it? That they can start getting used to that. And actually what you might find is that, you know, they get a bit more comfortable earlier and want to transition into that hard ball stuff. So yeah, look, I think anecdotally, yeah, we'd encourage anybody in whatever space you're doing to, you know, start testing the boat and seeing if kids want to put that equipment on and see how they go. Really good point. Thanks for that.
Can I ask a question around using the bowling machine? So we've been fortunate to buy a bowling machine, but what we do find is we struggle that when we do use it, it's very bouncy. So obviously we're not bowling at, we're not pinging it into the 11-year-olds at 80 miles an hour, but even when it's 30, 40, is there any tips around how you're going to adjust it or try and do, are there any drills you suggest? Or
are we talking indoor or outdoor?
Indoor will be fine.
Indoor. Ames looks
I
like
can answer it for you if you want.
this one, yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes we'll put it on a double bounce, rather than like bounce it once. If you do a double bounce, it gets them used to it and it won't bounce as much.
What size legs have you got, Gareth? That's a personal question.
36.
Yeah, so you got different poles
Yeah.
go into the bottom of the machines, and you get junior size, which brings the height down as well.
Yeah, we've got a stand, so I suppose we could just.
Yeah, that's why you just put it on the double bounce. That helps. Definitely does help.
Double bounce is what I was going to say. That we do that, and it takes a minute just to set up to make sure you double bounce. Depends if you want half volleys or back foot play, but double bounce works with all bowling machines. Dixie's right; the smaller legs would be, and you get junior bowlers as well, where you can sort of adjust the settings and come off with a bit more spin, and it sort of skids through, so it doesn't bounce above a child's sort of waist.
It's one of the biggest misconceptions, isn't it? It's one of we probably all see it as coaches, where bowling machines can get misused really quickly, and all you've got to do is that first experience for a child is that bowling machine to be either too quick or that it's coming up here when they're not quite ready for it, and we're probably doing them more harm than favors, to be fair. So it's a really good point you make, Gareth, around that. And look, we probably, I don't want to be advocating of buying and investing in loads of kit, because a double bounce could easily be done with an underarm throw at times. So don't feel it has to be reliant on a bowling machine, but you do see these little gizmos of automatic feed buddies and variations of much less expensive than a full-blown bowling machine that equally fire out balls that kind of in between a tennis ball and an Incredi ball. So it's kind of semi-soft plastic balls. And actually, again, if you've got kids padded up, getting used to coming down the wicket, hitting a ball that's being tossed up in front of them, that can be a really, really conducive way to building that confidence as well. So yeah, really good question.
Also, they get you can get the 3-ounce bowling machine balls as well, so they're lighter. So when you start with them, so it's not quite as a big step then from going straight to the bowling machine 5-ounce, really the harder balls. So that might help as well. You can buy them on the same websites normally.
Yeah, because they are quite weighty, aren't they?
Yeah, they're orange normally, the 3-ounce ones. Like they're softer, they're spongier.
That's good to know. Thank you.
They'll sting, but they won't bruise. That's the general rule with those orange ones. But yeah, really good question though. Really good. Anybody else for anything? Some really good ones there.
Just what? Sorry, Matt. Just one other question I hear a lot from clubs and from coaches, particularly, is sort of they're a little bit reluctant to push kids into hardball because they don't know whether they're. I suppose the way I'm asking is there a right time, or is it just down to confidence? Is it just down to knowing your child, or is it about just literally push them in? Is it that progression that we want? We've done all that. We've done a lot of softball. We've worked a lot on technique and so on, and it's just okay. It's no different. It's just the ball is harder, and yes, you're wearing equipment. So is it a natural progression, or coaches, are they just worried about their own situation? I don't know.
Oh, such a good question. Ian Williams, I'm going to come to you in a second. Just to share my 10 pence worth, not that my answer will be gospel, but I do think it varies. That sounds like I'm properly sitting on the fence. Look, you will have kids itching to get the equipment on and go straight to hardball, and others you might have to coax a little bit. But again, it probably comes back to that gradual progression, and I'd always advocate that you start slightly at the lower end of that if someone isn't sure. Even if they are sure, you may not be sure of their competency with a hardball. It only takes, say, one blow, even with a really confident kid, and that, they may not come back from that. So just you don't lose from starting a little, a few stages below, whether it's that padded up with an Incredible. That's probably your best place to start, or as Amy said, kind of some double bounce kind of throwdowns or bowling machine type stuff. I don't think you can lose from that, again, from the safety element. You'll get a feel pretty quick whether that player's got the ability or the competency or the confidence to go up the gears. But yeah, that's probably what I'd start off. Ian, do you want to add to that a bit better than what?
Yeah, I think the invention of dynamos may help there, because when the automatic progression in the past before dynamos came was once they reach 10 or they're not eligible for under-9 softball, then the automatic progression is to the under-11 team. They can be quite young, they could be physically in stature not that big, and they could be playing against bigger boys. So what we've done this year, we've had a number of boys that have been in the softball program who are now due to go into under-11s, but they're only 10. And we've looked at them in an indoor session and just thought they're not ready for that yet, because they're playing against boys who could be pathway players. They're in the same sessions as boys who are pathway players. So we've said to them, have a season of dynamos, and then that will transition them from softball with a then Incredible, essentially, and with a bit more structure and technique. And then after a year in dynamos, they may be ready then to move into the under-11 hardball environment, whereas they wouldn't necessarily be ready at the age of 9 come on 10, but they will be as 10 come on 11. And just on the contrary to that, the other thing that I noticed sometimes with the more talented players who are still eligible to play softball, but are good enough to play young at hardball, is that softball doesn't do them any good. They obviously need this to be then in hardball, because with softball, it's a tennis ball, it bounces more, they tend to hit everything in the air over mid-wicket, because that's the shape of the shot with the bounce. And so with the very more talented players, the ones that you can identify as definitely have a future, not necessarily professionally, but a good play at a good standard, then we try and get them to avoid necessarily playing hardball. One, they're too good for it on a Sunday morning. And secondly, it doesn't do their techniques any good when they then come to play on a Monday night in pace cricket at under-11. So it works both ways, really. I think you just got to judge the player, but I would say don't be frightened to use dynamos.
Thanks, Ian. The only thing I'd add to that, Paul, as well, if you've got somebody particularly who you feel like you might need to coax, boy or girl, I mean, I don't know whether an 8-year-old, you ask some 8-year-olds who's your favourite player, and they wouldn't be able to tell you who their favourite player is. Others will be able to reel off 7 of their favourite people they've seen on the telly. So trying to get them to relate to somebody they might have seen on kids want to copy what they see on TV all the time, certainly around the sports side of stuff. So, if you've got a youngster who's a bit, who's your favourite player? Get something up on YouTube and show me what your favourite player does. That can be a really easy way of just trying to get them to start to emulate that, and you can do that in a really watered down drill or game or whatever it might be, even if it's fielding. So yeah, hopefully Ian has answered that one for you a little bit. Patrick, good man, you got a hand up. Do you want to come off mute, Patrick? What's on your mind?
Yeah, just to touch a bit on what Paul said there. One of the things we did last year a lot in our clubs, we played intra-club games, and whilst out on the field coaching, I'd quite often have an Incredible or a softer ball in my pocket, and then we'd swap depending on who was batting and who was bowling. And I think, like Ian said earlier, trying to match the abilities and the ages up to make sure that the one, not one child was batting against another child who was far more advanced or far less advanced, so everyone got the most out of the sessions. Geographically in Aberystwyth, one of our biggest issues is actually getting hardball games for these children who need hardball games. We've had a lot of children in the pathway over the winter who are now going to be under 11s, under 12s, this summer coming, and it's just trying to find ways of getting them games now in and around the area, because unless you can get them games, there's no real incentive for the ones in the pathway will be fine because they'll get their games, but the ones who aren't quite at that level yet to be in the pathway, how do we get them playing so they can see that there is some progression, rather than just playing Dynamo's cricket and softball cricket, because that them festivals and them games are a lot easier to come by geographically. So it's just trying to figure out ways, like working with Paul to incentivize these kids to develop, because if they're not quite ready for the pathway, it's trying to find ways to incentivize them to want to develop into hardball rather than just continue playing softball cricket.
We've had that conversation, Pat, and I completely agree with you. I think hence the premise of my questions really was, how do we get those clubs, certainly in our area, playing more hardball and making that transition, because it's necessary. So we can have that conversation.
Yeah,
Again, it's a really good point you make around the different balls in your pocket and having the agility in a game or practice session to be able to flip between that to cater for the the various kind of standards of play you might have. So that's a really good one. You don't say no coach wants to be chucking 9-10 different balls on the pitch. So that's a really easy practical one that people might better steal from you, that one. So thanks for that. That's brilliant. And yeah, I empathise with the Aberystwyth one. That is a unique one. So I'll leave you and Paul to unpick that one maybe at a later date, if that's okay.
Yeah, and just final point: if anyone is interested in any friendlies or any games during the summer, just get in touch with us, and we'll try and arrange something. And like I say, we used to traveling in Aberystwyth, so we don't mind traveling. We're far and beyond just to get these kids playing games.
Good man. Good stuff. Hopefully some useful pointers there from some of your own context. So thanks for sharing that. Feel free to say we've got the hour. Well, I won't keep us any longer than what we want to, if nobody's got anything else. But there is still time if you've got anything you want to share.
Can I have one more question? And this is probably more for Ian Martin. This, to be fair, it's about going forward for the season that we're obviously facing. I'm just wondering how it's going to go about, where some kids might not be able to play with the hardball yet, but then they're still in the under-11 set up for a match. I don't know the ins and outs there yet, Ian, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's so. Yeah, this is very much a North Wales Junior Cricket League scenario where won't bore everyone else on the call with it, but yeah, we're going to full hardball rather than it was half and half in previous seasons. Speaking to George and John, the chair and secretary of the league, we're gonna put an option for softball. So on the entry form, or after all the entries are in, we're going back to the clubs to say, right, with under 11s offering, who wants to enter a softball team as well, or instead of. So yeah, that's bubbling away. By the end of the month, we'll be clear with that. Niall, just a very quick one. Would you saying North of Pole, are they going to be entering a hardball or both, or just the softball? So I can feed back to John.
I think the way we're aiming is we're actually going for the hard. Obviously, if it needs a softball as well, then potentially we might be able to get two. Okay.
Well, that's good. Yeah, in an ideal world, I think every club would be entering a hardball and softball, and that's going to cater for all. But we're not quite in that ideal world just yet. But we'll aim for that utopia, I think. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Cheers.
No, all good. I think we're going to finish. We started with Paul Richards. I think we're going to finish with Paul Richards at this rate.
Sorry.
So no, not at all.
Sorry, something just come into my head as going through his discussions, because I think we enter in two sides under 11s, which obviously is great, but I think the thinking behind that is we've got a set of kids that are more likely advanced than the others, which we'll find. Some of them played with us last year, and then obviously you've got the guys coming out the Dynamos that not necessarily had any introduction to Hardball at all. So something just popped in my mind. What about using Incredibles as part of a game, or would that be down to the Gwent League? Is that something we can maybe raise, or just speak to a club on a week-to-week basis, whoever you're playing, for that second team? So the guys that have already played Hardball will play Hardball week in, week out. But would you recommend then, obviously for the guys that haven't had any introduction or minimal introduction to Hardball, which are going to be playing in, I want to say B team, but the other team, would you recommend that we speak to the league or speak to the club on a week-to-week basis that you're playing and go, well, how do you fancy playing with an Incredible type thing? Has anyone else come across that?
I might pop that one to Mark Dixon for a thought. I mean, look, it's probably not for us to kind of, if we're talking leagues and that type of thing, it's probably not for us to kind of start messing around with rules probably on the back of this call. But look, any engagement with leagues where you feel like there's a really valid piece of feedback to go, look, is there a conversation that can be had around this? Look, I think any of that is going to result in a really healthy conversation and discussion around what's best for the players in that scenario and circumstance. So that sounds like I'm massively sitting on the fence, which I probably am, but I would I'd engage in some dialogue there and see what is the most suitable and appropriate thing to do, I'd imagine. Nixie, is that that's not really your area to tackle either.
I don't mind coming in on this if you like, Matt. I think it's really tricky for Cricket Wales. We're not governing the league, so it is down to an individual league. I know. I've been involved with the junior league up in North Wales for about 15 years now. We've battered back into a lot of leagues over in England. They say that the big strong leagues, they'll have a hardball under 11s and a softball under 11s league. And most clubs will have 1, 2, 3 teams in each of them. I think if you were to speak to your local league and say, listen, we've got a lot of players here who aren't quite ready for hardball, but they're in that under 11 section. We want to provide cricket for them. How can we go about that? Is that just arranging ad-lib friendlies with other clubs who are in a similar situation? Or can we as a league set something up as a little bit more formal, some structured fixtures, even if it's just half a dozen fixtures to start the ball rolling, to say, right, well, yeah, we've got a hardball offer and we're catering for them and that's brilliant. But what about the other ones who aren't quite ready for that and that transition stage? I think your league can't speak for them, but surely I'd like to think they're going to listen and say, yeah, do you know what, something we could do here, even if it is just putting all those interested clubs, canvassing who's interested. Here you are, contact each other and organise the games yourselves as a starting point.
I mean, the two sides are actually being entered in the leagues, but I'm just looking at it from a level perspective. I know there's going to be X amount of boys and girls that will be playing and have them for last year as well. But then I know there's going to be some coming up that possibly haven't had that so much of an introduction. So it's just a thought. I obviously knew that it's around the what the Gwent League and the leagues sort of want to go with, but just looking for a view or if anyone's had that kind of scenario really. And
we've had it up north quite a lot over the last few years, as I say, without boring you. The last 3-4 years, the first half of the season of under 11s was supposed to be Incredible. The second half was Hardball. Don't ask the reasons why we got there and whatever. But
to do with the wickets, was it trying out?
Yeah, when we hit that second half of the season, just like what Pat was saying, coaches would go on to the field with a Hardball and Incredible, and there might be a batting pair where we're going to use Incredible for this player. It does throw its challenges up, because if you're playing a team who within each team have got players who aren't quite ready and who are ready. It's really hard to be fair to all players. I say for me personally, the danger, if you want to use that word, isn't necessarily the batters if they've got the correct equipment on and if they're wearing it correctly. It's what's coming back the other way into the field. And George, who he's not really ready for hardball. He might be making a daisy chain at square leg, and someone whacks a ball at him. There's the sort of danger, and where coaches need to be a bit sensible about who they're playing and when and safety. If the leagues can facilitate it, I think we're going to end up doing that, something similar in answer to Niall's question of whether we get enough interest to run both types of formats, hardball, softball, under 11s. I'd love to think we can. But if not, we're going to have to run some games where we will have a hard ball for a few overs and a ready ball for a few overs. And it is where we're at right now.
Oh,
okay.
Paul, hopefully
Thanks,
that's
guys.
answered that to a point. Maybe in a yeah, it's a tricky balance to strike, isn't it? But look, I'm just conscious of time. I've done a rubbish job of chairing that because we've gone over time by 2 minutes. So apologies. Look, I think I really hope if anything if tonight is going, it's just stimulated a bit of thought really. As the season gets nearer around maybe some of say the really good stuff. There's clearly loads of good stuff that's going on from some of the examples everyone's kind of thrown in the mix there. So yeah, hopefully you can be reasonably buoyed by that, and hopefully one or two maybe nuggets that have come out of that will be helpful. But I will send those slides out. I'll probably do that tomorrow, and I'm happy to send a recording out as well if that's helpful for people. But look, just allow us the chance to, whether it's any of us five on the call, whether it's anybody else from a Cricket Wales staffing point of view in your respective areas, look, that there is support out there for you. If you're ever not sure of something, don't ever feel like you can't drop somebody a note and someone will be able to lend you some support and advice. Okay. But yeah, thanks again for tuning in. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing what goes on in the summer.
Cheers, everyone.
All right. Take care.